start this off by saying, yes, this is the second quarterly Connecticut River Watershed webinar and hosted by the Old Lyme Conservation Commission and Estuary magazine, but also sponsored by the Connecticut River Salmon Association. My name is Steve Gephardt, and I've been recruited to fill in for Rich Shriver, who normally performs this role, but he couldn't join us tonight. So I'm taking over, and sort of forgive me as I fumble along because this Zoom format is a little bit different than what I'm used to. So uh, just as a quick means of introduction for me, I'm a fish biologist, retired from the Connecticut DEP, but I'm a co-writer of a column called Below the Surface for Estuary magazine. So I'm pleased to step in and join this very interesting webinar. Just as a little review of where we've been, the first webinar, which was this past January, was dealing with water quality and was presented by Dr. Andrew Fisk of American Rivers. The third one, which will come in July, will be presented by Dan Wilder of the Norcross Wildlife Foundation, talking about building resilient habitats. And tonight we're going to hear about bird habitats. And then the last one in October, I will be presenting on aquatic habitats. So you see a theme here. Habitats are very important, as we will all learn as we listen along. Estuary has also arranged for a speaker for a fifth webinar next January. We don't have a date on that yet, but stay tuned because that's going to cover the geological history of the watershed. All of these webinars are being recorded, and they will be made available on YouTube. So stay tuned for that. Now, before I introduce our speaker, I'll just say that you're all muted, and we will encourage you to submit questions to for our speaker in the chat function. We won't take those during the presentation, but when the presentation is over, I will look at the chat and answer and repeat those questions to the speaker so they can be answered. And by the way, we do have some people right here with us today that in Old Lyme, the Conservation Commission. They may have some questions, so I will be looking to them too. And while I'm at it, I just mentioned that we have a lovely watercolor behind us, a nice mouth of the river scene of, looks to me like Duck River or Black Hall and the Great Island and the Old Lyme Congregational Church in the background. So that's an appropriate setting. So let's get on to our speaker. Tonight, we are delighted to have a speaker talk about avian habitats, Jilian Liner. Jilian is a conservation director of Audubon, Vermont. She has more than 2 decades of bird and habitat conservation with Audubon. So it's my great pleasure to turn the mic over to Jilian, ask her to pop up on the screen and share her screen. Yeah, there we go.
Great. That looks good, hopefully, for everybody. You can see a nice tufted titmouse looking at you.
Yes, looks good.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Steve. Thank you for the introduction. It's great to be here this evening. I want to thank the Old Lyme Conservation Commission and the Estuary magazine for hosting this series. Appreciate Dick Shriver inviting me to speak, and to everyone for helping to make it happen. This is, I think I mentioned this to to Dick, this is probably the best time of year to be talking about birds. I did a quick scan of the participants. I saw some familiar names. I know there's some birders out there. But if you're like me, have been enjoying the past week or few weeks with the return of some of our migrants from their wintering grounds, eastern phoebes, red-winged blackbirds, American woodcock. And it really, in my mind, it makes the change of seasons really magical. And so tonight I'm going to talk a bit about the birds of the Connecticut River watershed, how some birds have been doing, their populations, but also what's being done across the watershed, and even things that you can do to help make a difference for birds in the places they need. But first, I wanted to start a little bit with why birds? Why birds, not only for me, but also for Audubon. And I'll start with me, why I chose a career in birds. And it started with this species, the bald eagle. And it was a handful or so decades ago when I was an undergraduate, a biology major. And I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, what would be next. And I took an internship with the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. And it was in the 90s. And I was monitoring wintering bald eagles. And it was an incredible opportunity to be part, in a very small way, but a powerful way for me, in the monitoring the recovery of that species. It was one that was almost extirpated from New York, and there were a lot of efforts that went in to bring the population back. And it hooked me, and I continued to take a couple other field positions around the country, mostly focused on birds. And I opted to go back to graduate school, and I got my master's in something a little broader, ecology and planning. I knew I wanted to do something in conservation, in the field of conservation, but birds stayed with me. And when I graduated the University of Vermont, I had an opportunity to come work for Audubon, and Audubon's mission of protecting birds and the places they need now and into the future matched perfectly with my passion. And Audubon focuses on birds because they can tell us so much about the health of the environment. They are incredible indicators of ecosystem health. When birds are doing well, typically the environment is doing well. When birds are experiencing declines, something isn't right with the environment, and sometimes that something not being right can be a signal of broader environmental challenges. They also support ecosystem function and provide a number of benefits. You know, they control insects, they pollinate plants, they disperse seeds, and they certainly offer a lot of enjoyment to people. 1 in 3 Americans consider themselves a birder. That's 100 million people that enjoy getting out and watching birds, or watching birds from their home or their place. They're also well studied and widely accessible. Steve and I can kind of battle out whether the fish are better to be a taxa representing ecosystem health, or whether it's the birds, but birds are easy to study, easier to study than some other taxa. They're one of the most well-studied taxa. They are found across a number of different habitats, landscapes across the US, North America, the hemisphere. And that wealth of knowledge in terms of what's happening with our environment and serving as indicators is incredibly helpful to pick up when there is an issue, and also to track how we are doing managing and responding to environmental issues. They also help connect habitats across landscapes and the globe, because they're found everywhere, and also because some of them migrate. And so if we have a bird up here in Old Lyme, or in the Connecticut River watershed, or across the Northeast, and it's breeding up here, and we're wanting to see and ensure it's doing all right, we have to understand and have knowledge about where it goes during migration, where it stops, where it goes during the winter, our winter, and what's happening there. So our conservation efforts here need to be connected to other places on its journey. And as importantly, birds help connect people to nature. There's something people can see and connect with. and they bring us closer to nature. So thinking about how birds are a window into environmental health, let's keep moving and scan out a little bit, pull out a little bit, and take a look at the Connecticut River watershed, which Steve mentioned. Andy Fisk was the first speaker of this series, and if you were able to join his talk, he set the stage nicely, talking about the river and water quality and what's happened over the years in terms of the Connecticut River and the efforts to improve water quality across this watershed. And it's a large watershed. It's the river is New England's largest river. It flows all the way up from up in New Hampshire down to the Sound. It drains 4 states, over 7 million acres. And it's not only a significant footprint in terms of the New England terrestrial landscape, 70% of the fresh water entering Long Island Sound comes from the river. So it plays a big part in Long Island Sound health as well. It connects the forest farms and coastal habitats and communities across New England. And it also supports hundreds of bird species. There are some places in the Connecticut River watershed that have documented over 450 species. And tonight I'm going to talk and share a little bit of that, like a tiny bit of that diversity that's found across the watershed and the associated habitats. And we'll start down there over in the Old Lyme area along the coast, where there's coastal habitats and there's salt marsh habitats. And those of you who are there or live there on the coast, you could probably look out and you could envision and imagine what birds might be found in this type of habitat, including species like the great egret, which is a conservation success story back in the late 1800s. And some of you who are involved in Audubon or your local Audubon chapter, Bird Alliance, you're familiar with the massive fashion trend in the late 1800s where women were decorating their hats with feathers. And that plume trade led to the killing of millions of birds. And the response to that drove the early conservationists, people like Harriet Hemingway and Mina B. Hall, to organize boycotts of those hats. And they built a movement to protect birds. And that was actually the grassroots effort that became the foundation of the Audubon Society. And if you think about another bird that is a conservation success story, but a little bit more recent time, is the osprey. This fish-eating bird nearly disappeared because of DDT, similar to the bald eagle, and then made a dramatic recovery, and its population is doing really well along Long Island Sound and up across the watershed. You often see their big stick nests on platforms and utility poles. And a more recent conservation need, not quite success yet, but certainly the efforts of Audubon and others are focused on this bird, this small sparrow, the salt marsh sparrow. It's really become the poster bird for climate change. It is one of the most threatened birds in the Northeast. It nests in the tidal marshes, has a really small population, really restricted range, and it times its nesting between high tides. Literally, like lay an egg, hatch the egg, have your chicks and fledge your chicks within those high tide cycles. And so, as you might imagine, it's highly vulnerable to sea level rise and coastal flooding. And before we move from off the coast, I wanted to pick this tiny, adorable bufflehead, one duck to represent. We have our habitats on the coast and we have our habitats actually across the watershed that are really significant for breeding birds, but they're also really important to birds during their migration and also during the winter. And there are a large number of wintering ducks that call the Sound and the coastal areas home during the winter months, and they travel a long distance. This bufflehead nests in boreal forests of Canada and Alaska, and a lot of the other waterfowl that come down from Canada and Alaska travel and spend their winters on the Sound. And if we move our way up the river, we know there are large industrial areas, there's urban areas, there's suburban areas, and these places support birds too. And I'd be remiss if I didn't include a few urban birds like the rock pigeon. But there's also species like the peregrine falcon that rely on urban areas. In fact, some urban areas have as high a density nesting peregrine falcons as some natural areas. So peregrine falcons, again, another raptor, bird of prey that recovered after DDT and is found nesting in on buildings and in bridges, but also still in natural cliffs across the watershed. Another bird that can be found in urban and suburban areas is this distinctive looking bird, the cedar waxwing. It's a fruit-loving social bird. They nest in shrubs and small trees, often along like forest edges or riparian areas, but also in neighborhoods. And then certainly during migration in winter, you can see them in flocks, and they'll gather in urban areas and suburban areas where there's suitable berry-producing trees and shrubs. And so we'll continue up the river. This photo is a little way up the river, but I loved it, and I actually couldn't find a better one. Markel Smith, who leads the Connecticut River Partnership, shared this photo with me. And it represents the mix of habitats, especially in the valleys of, there's agriculture, there's still riparian tributaries, shrubby areas, and wetlands. And it's in these habitats that we find birds like this beautiful wood duck, one of the most colorful ducks in North America, that actually nests in tree cavities. And if you want to see something fun, go to YouTube, go to Google, and search for ducklings, wood duck ducklings jumping from their nests. There's some really cute videos out there, which they do shortly after hatching. In these mixed areas, there's also this bird, the American woodcock, which is a bird that just has returned to the Northeast, performs a unique spiraling courtship flight at dusk. And if you're connected with a bird club or a bird alliance or Audubon chapter, or you know somebody who's leading bird walks, they often this time of year lead bird walks specifically to go see that courtship flight. And like I mentioned, this is a bird, it depends on shrubby areas. It likes open areas for the courtship displays, but it likes shrubby areas adjacent to woods. So it kind of likes a mix, and it's declining with the loss of early successional habitat. Similar to this eastern towhee, it's a ground nesting shrubby bird, and it relies on those forest edge and shrub habitats that are declining because of habitat loss and a change in forest structure. And this bird has a cool, I haven't heard it yet. I haven't heard it back, but it has a song that some people say sounds like "Drink Your Tea." Another bird often found in more open areas, the eastern bluebird. And this has a conservation success story around it. Bluebirds declined in the 40s and 70s. I can remember growing up, my mom always talking about bluebirds and being concerned about bluebirds. And there were a few factors at play. Actually, DDT was one of them, but also competition with other introduced species. But the banning and also the efforts of thousands of people putting up bluebird boxes actually made a difference. And this bird is making a strong comeback. Proof that, and a great example of how community-driven conservation can make a difference. And I'll end this group with this pair of bobolinks. The male is the black and white one, and the female, actually often if you see the female, these birds are considered grassland birds, which in the Northeast are hay fields or old grass or old fields. The female, if you see it, you could almost just miss it or say, it's just some brown like sparrow. But this is the male and the female. And as I'll talk about later in the presentation, grassland birds are a group of birds that are declining significantly, more so than many other groups of birds. And this grassland bird, the bobolink in particular, is one of the longest distance migrants among the grassland birds. It travels from the Northeast all the way to South America. And so now I'll move up the watershed a little bit further and go into the forested areas. About 70 to 75% of the Connecticut River watershed is forested. And that high level of forest, especially in northern parts of Vermont and New Hampshire, is a big reason why the watershed supports such rich biodiversity, and it helps provide the clean water downstream. Even as you move south in the watershed through Massachusetts and Connecticut, and the landscape is more of that mixed landscape that I was talking about previously, the forest still plays a dominant role in this watershed. And these same forests, the Atlantic Northern Forests of Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, and New York, are home to some of the greatest diversity of breeding bird species in the continental US. That's right, the Northeast. We are a breeding bird factory, especially for forest birds. And that's based on data from the Breeding Bird Survey, which is a long-term, large-scale bird monitoring program that was initiated in the 1960s. It tracks populations of breeding birds. And those data sets have shown that the highest species richness and the average number of forest birds per breeding bird survey route occurs in the Northeast and a little bit of the upper Midwest. So it's a really significant landscape for those birds. And who are some of those birds? I am picked for this presentation just a couple of the wood warblers. And they're all in their striking like breeding plumage. But species like this one, the black-throated blue warbler, tends to be thought of as a strong indicator of a healthy, mature forest with dense understory. It actually nests in the understory. So if you ever look out at a forest and you can see through the forest, like some people like that and say it's park-like and they enjoy it, that is not the best place for birds. And it's not always the most healthy or resilient forests. And so at Audubon, our forest programs promote structural diversity, messy forest. And in part, it's because a species like this, which we think of as a forest bird, likes that shrubby part of the forest. It doesn't nest up high in the canopy. Unlike this bird, which is one of the most striking warblers with this bright flame orange throat, the Blackburnian warbler, it lives high in the canopy of mature conifer forests or northern forests with a mix of hardwood and conifers. And they build their nests far up in the trees. So actually they can be really hard to spot. Again, another reason why this time of year, as the birds are all returning, it's the best time to bird because you can get out and you can actually see some of these birds before all the leaves pop out. And if you're seeing these species, typically you're in a mature complex forest. And then there's forest birds like the chestnut-sided warbler, which is an absolutely adorable little bird that some say its song sounds like please, please, please to meet you. This is also considered a forest bird, but it likes the open areas, like where there's been a disturbance, a blowdown, or some forest management that's created an opening. And so it's a shrubby habitat or a young forest within a forested landscape. And it is facing pressures as forests, especially in the Northeast, mature and become very even age. That is, the trees are mostly all the same age, and there isn't a lot of that structural diversity. And then a final, I had to include an owl in here, include the barred owl here. it's a forest bird, but it can be found in a couple different habitats, and actually is expanding its range into new areas in some places. So how are all these birds doing? Unfortunately, a number of them are declining. And a report in 2019, some of you might have seen it, it got a lot of press, showed that 3 billion birds have been lost since the 1970s. And this study found steep declines across virtually, not all, but virtually all groups of birds in the US and Canada. And the population models were based on several decades of standardized bird survey data sets. And what this resulted in is 1 in 4 birds are gone since 1970. And some of them are very common birds like dark-eyed juncos. And you can take the data and you can look at it. They grouped it based on types of birds. So aerial insectivores declined by 32%, and grassland birds declined by 53%, and eastern forest birds 17%, and coastal shorebirds I didn't bring, and I should have, but I didn't include the image of the coastal birds. Shorebirds, which are already at dangerously low numbers, have lost more than a third of their population. And in addition to this survey, even a more recent survey, which has been getting recent press that came out in Science in February of 2026, showed that some of the declines are actually more serious than what this study even showed, and in more recent years. And it also showed a correlation to the declines being greater in areas with intensive agriculture. And so what's causing these declines? And I'd say the biggest drivers of bird declines come down to a few things: habitat loss and degradation, caused from development and agriculture and the way that we manage our lands; climate change, which has a number of compounding factors. We're seeing a shift in habitats. We're seeing extreme weather events, which are impacting habitat and species, spread of invasives, the introduction of new pests, pesticides and declining insect populations are being elevated and lifted up as a notable issue, and also collision and direct mortality, windows, cats, vehicles. Different birds are affected in different ways, but these pressures are happening across the watershed and the birds that are found here. And I just want to spend a couple more minutes talking about the impacts of climate change, because Audubon did a report a few years ago on the impacts of climate change on birds. There are some tools online that you can explore the report and the tools available to look at how birds are doing in your area. And the study compiled data from birders and scientists and used those data to characterize where birds live today. And they related those observations with climate and habitat conditions to model suitable ranges now and then into the future in different climate scenarios. And then they projected how would the species range shift and how would other impacts, human impacts, impact those species. And the results showed that 2/3 of North American bird species are at risk from climate change, which probably isn't a huge surprise to many people. But they also looked at individual birds, but they also grouped them by habitat preferences. And that's what this, sorry, I look over here because my main screen is over here. That's where what this graph shows is not all birds are declining equally. Species tied to highly vulnerable habitats like the Arctic and boreal birds and even water birds are at greater risk than some of the generalist birds that are adapted to human landscapes or that are found in a wider range of habitats, are likely to be more stable and possibly even increasing. And so the good news is that science shows, and then history tells us that we can take action. If we take action, we can help improve the situation for these birds and species at risk. And Audubon is striving to do just that. We are hoping to, we say, bend the bird curve, stabilize or even reverse some of these declines that we have seen. And our strategic plan, which we call our flight plan, outlines the path forward for us as an organization to improve the health and resilience of habitats for birds and biodiversity, conserve and steward habitats that sequester and capture carbon, advancing policies, partnering with communities to make change, and we're taking a hemispheric approach. Again, just like how the birds connect us across the Connecticut River watershed, they connect us across the hemisphere. So we need to be making a difference across all the places that they depend on. And when we think about the watershed, the Connecticut River watershed, and what needs to be done, what can be done, I want to start with the Connecticut River watershed partnership. This is a group that brings together a wide range of organizations. It formed in 2005. It was initially called the Friends of the Conti, and then over the past few years has done a sort of an evolution of its mission, of its scope. And it has local groups like the White River Partnership and Black River Action Team involved, and regional groups like the awesome Connecticut River Conservancy, and state organizations like Mass Audubon, and national organizations like the Nature Conservancy and Audubon, along with federal and state agencies, all working together to try to improve conservation and engagement across the Connecticut River watershed. And one of, that would be a whole separate talk on the Connecticut River Partnership, but I'll highlight one priority for this group is passing federal legislation, the Connecticut River Watershed Partnership Act, which would provide a stream of funding to advance conservation efforts, restoration, education, and recreation across the watershed, enhance the coordination of all of us that are a part of that watershed, and recruit additional people to get involved. So it's this overarching group that is helping to connect people and advance conservation. I've been a part of it. I was with the New York office for most of my career, the Audubon New York office, and about 4 years ago shifted to the Vermont team and got introduced and engaged in it with actually Dick, who's listening here, like 3 or so years ago. And it's just been a really positive experience, and I'm super excited with all the work that they've been doing. Moving from kind of this watershed-wide coalition group, shifting back to some of the work of Audubon, we do have major areas of work at Audubon focused on habitat conservation, climate action, policy, and community building. And I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about some of those conservation programs in the Connecticut River. I talked about how the majority of the watershed is forested, and a big part of our conservation portfolio in Vermont and with our colleagues at Audubon, Connecticut, and in Audubon, New York, we have a big part of our conservation portfolio is focused on promoting healthy forests. And we have programs like Bird Friendly Maple and the Forester Endorsement Program. And we work one-on-one with landowners and managers to provide technical assistance on how to manage forests in ways that make them healthier and more resilient. And I'll just share a bit more about the Bird Friendly Maple Program. It is, if you're not familiar with it, Audubon works with maple producers to manage their sugar bushes in ways that support maple syrup, the production of maple syrup, but also healthy bird habitat. It's a voluntary program. Producers get connected with Audubon staff. We do site assessments. We work with foresters on management plans. And if the producers commit to following forestry guidelines that maintain diverse, structurally complex forests So that's things like retaining a mix of tree species and ages, preserving features like standing dead trees. They can get enrolled in the program, and then they get a little bird label that has the scarlet tanager on it, and they sell their product with that label on it. And it has to be, renewed every 5 years. But we have a new website where you can actually go and see where the nearest producer is to you and buy bird-friendly maple syrup. Because maple production occurs across millions of acres in the Northeast, the program represents a powerful working lands approach to conservation. In addition to our work with forest landowners and managers, we also work in the agricultural landscape. Our bird and bee friendly farm program connects with landowners and managers who have farms and farm habitat, and we similarly make recommendations on ways to promote bird and pollinator habitat. And one of the aspects of that program is the Bobolink Project. And for those of you who haven't heard about the Bobolink Project, it's led by Mass Audubon, and it's a partnership with Mass Audubon, New Hampshire Audubon, Audubon Vermont, and the University of Vermont. And we connect with landowners and provide financial incentive for farmers who are willing to delay mowing, because one of the biggest threats to grassland birds in the Northeast is the timing of mowing, and it happening too frequently, or the timing such that it impacts and birds are not able to successfully have chicks fledged. Another program is our Birds and Watersheds program, which promotes plantings along riparian areas. It's a collaboration with watershed groups, conservation districts, to plant not only for water quality, but also to improve bird habitat. There are many efforts to improve riparian habitats, and many groups had a certain formula and a certain way to approach that planting. And partnering with these groups, we've made some adjustments to the plantings that make them more advantageous for birds. And in that way, we're helping both the birds and the water, and even managing the flow of water during major storm events. The final program, and I didn't cover all of Audubon's program and work across the watershed, but the final one that I'll mention is the bird-friendly communities work. And Audubon's bird-friendly communities empowers people to create healthy habitats right where they live. So this is about you. We talked a little bit about a large partnership effort. We talked about the work of Audubon as an organization and the partners we work with, but then there's things that we can do as individuals, whether it's in our backyards or our neighborhoods, or if we own a farm, or we want to work in a public space. Things like planting native species, participating in community science, reducing pesticides, supporting bird safe practices like lights out campaigns or making your glass windows safer for birds. These connect everyday choices to conservation and conservation outcomes. And so at the core, it's recognizing the change can start with us. The plants we choose, the products we purchase, bird-friendly maple, and the voices we lift up for advocacy all play a role in shaping what birds and what we need. And with all of that collectively together, the hope is that we can have stories to tell like this, which these slides, these results are the same 3 billion birds report that I mentioned earlier. These are the groups of birds that are doing well. Waterfowl have gained populations as a direct result of conservation efforts in the protection of wetlands. Raptors have gained, and I kind of, touched on that when I talked about the eagle and the falcon and the osprey. And woodpeckers have increased as a group of birds in population. as a result of forests growing back and maturing and leaving more dead wood on the landscape. They end up being one of the winners at this time. And again, the hope, though, is that we can take those slides of forest birds and grassland birds and say, from this point forward, in 10 years and 20 years and 30 years, 50, we're seeing stable populations or even increases where possible. And I'll close with this image of tree swallows. And for those of you who are in Old Lyme, you're likely familiar with the huge gathering each fall along the Connecticut River, hundreds of thousands together using those wetlands. And it happens because the right habitats are still in place. There's places for these birds to nest. There's places for them to stop during migration and in the winter to support them along their journey. And what is seen there in Old Lyme, it's just one moment in a much larger story. Birds moving across entire watersheds, linking forest farms, rivers, coastal communities. And the powerful thing is that each one of us is part of that story too. And the choices that we make, what we plant, what we buy, how we speak up, shape the future of the habitats. So I encourage you to stay connected and engaged, and whether it's creating a space for birds at home or supporting a local or state or national conservation group or simply paying a closer attention to nature, your actions matter. And you don't have to go far to find something extraordinary in the Connecticut River watershed, and small actions can really make a big difference. And so with that, I'll say thank you and open it up for questions.
Well, thank you very much, Jilian. That was a wonderful presentation. We saw some great bird pictures. We saw some really sobering data, but you closed with some encouraging data and some ways that we can all get involved and help with conservation of birds. So I am going to, I don't, you're, are you going to stop sharing? Is that what we're looking at now?
Yeah, I will stop.
Yeah.
There.
Yeah, there you
Now
go.
can you see
Good.
me?
Yeah, that's perfect. So now I'm going to look at this toolbar and find the chat and look for questions. So um, Tim Lewis, our friend Tim Lewis from Weathersfield, he asks, are there whippoorwills in the Connecticut River watershed?
That is a really good question, Tim. I know where they are across Lake Champlain in Vermont. And in the Connecticut River watershed, um, I'm off the top of my head, I don't know, but you know how you can check, which there's so much I could have put into this talk. One of the resources of data is eBird, ebird.org. You do need to sign in and have an account with your email address. But if you log into eBird, you can search any species and you can search a location, you can search a time frame. And if I go into eBird and I say, I want to know if any whippoorwills were seen in this area, there have been sightings in recent years in the watershed. I don't know whether they're breeding successfully there, but they have occurred.
Thank you. And Barb Samuels is asking if ospreys are not doing great in Connecticut right now.
Are they not now?
Yeah,
Did she say they're
that's
not?
yeah, well, she says she understands that they're not doing great in Connecticut.
Well, I don't have the most recent data for Connecticut, but I will say I have heard about some bald eagles that have been impacted by avian flu. I don't know what the situation is with ospreys in Connecticut, but yeah, I mean, it's quite possible that they're not doing as well as they have been.
I guess that's a question for Connecticut DEP Wildlife. I wasn't aware that there was that problem. Certainly, there's been an increase of nests in recent years, but I don't know anything about the survival rates. Let's see what else we've got. Christine Woodside. Would you recommend that homeowners stop spraying pesticides outdoors, the sort of applications that companies provide to people who pay yearly fees? Do these chemicals, maybe to kill ticks or spiders, are these chemicals harmful to birds?
Yep, we would recommend people not use pesticides. Um, they do what they are supposed to do, which is reduce pests, and sometimes that's insects that are beneficial to birds. I think the warning signs when they go out on people's lawns should say enough, but we do not recommend that people use pesticides. There are certain situations with managing like invasive species where herbicides, if it's spot and very treated specifically, the trade-offs are worth it. But we have a lot of information on our website about maintaining lawns, reducing actual green lawns, creating native gardens, and not using pesticides.
And Martha has a question about chimney swifts. Do you
Uh,
have any tips for encouraging chimney swifts to nest in your chimney? I love this question because a lot of people think that chimney swifts are pests in their chimneys. I love it that she wants to know how to encourage them. We are about to have our chimney cap taken off in order to try to encourage them. There are two, three or four every summer that circle around our chimney. We want to do whatever we can to encourage them to nest in our chimney, but we're told the liner may be too smooth.
oh, yeah, that's interesting. First, that's awesome that you're thinking about them and trying to see what it is that you could do to help them nest there. I do know there are chimney nesting towers. I don't know how well used they are. We tried a few in New York. Um, some of your listeners who are familiar with that project might remember that, and didn't have great success. But chimney swifts are not doing well. Like, talk about an opportunity to come up with a conservation initiative that connects, uh, helps compile the information on what is working and what are the opportunities and tests solutions to be able to promote and offer more places for chimney swifts. They almost were one of the birds I was going to include in here because they are still found in some towns and cities. You can see them flying and making their little twittering noises in the evenings, but they are not doing well. So I commend you for trying. I don't I don't know enough about whether the inside of the chimney, if it's smooth or rough, but I would be interested, and I would hope maybe in the coming years there'll be a big, massive chimney swift conservation project because they are not doing well.
You know, I lived in an old house with an old stone chimney, and they nested every year in that, and that was delightful. But one of the things, of course, is timing your chimney cleaning. If you use your chimney, you need to clean it. You don't want to clean your chimney too early. You wait until everybody is fledged and out of there before you call the chimney sweep to clean your chimney. Yeah, so a fellow here at the in Old Lyme said that the furnace goes into the chimney, so you sometimes you have competing uses for those chimneys. Um,
It
the
makes
other
sense that a
thing,
smooth surface wouldn't be
yeah,
desirable.
a lot of times what'll happen in these old chimneys, the stones or bricks start leaking, so they hire a chimney sweep to line it with aluminum or stainless steel, I should say, liners, and that would probably not be very conducive to chimney sweeps. I'll add one more thing, and here in the mouth of the river in Old Saybrook, we had this really tall chimney that was part of a power plant when the coastal railroad was electric trolleys, and as part of the new bridge repair project, they tore that chimney down. And I know that there were chimney swifts going into that chimney. So one of the things some people have looked at is when buildings have to be torn down, is it structurally possible to leave the chimneys up for the trees? But I'm sure that is a case by case basis. Um, Carol asks not about birds, but bats. Do you have any thoughts about bats? Bats have declined a few years ago in southern Connecticut. They don't seem to be coming back. Any thoughts?
I don't have any thoughts on bats. I'm not, yeah, I'm not familiar with the declines in bats or what needs to be done besides, right? Like certain diseases that have
Yeah,
impacted populations. We need a bat biologist from deep.
yeah. That white nose syndrome has really affected bats in Connecticut. And I had heard some rumors that they were actually bouncing back a little bit, but I don't know. Um, Luke says that Connecticut Audubon monitors over 700 nests in Connecticut, and the fledge data for 2025 was flat. This is a concern that the devastation of the recent Chesapeake Bay osprey population due to the overfishing of Menhaden will also impact the Connecticut osprey population
Mm,
along Long Island Sound. So the future may be tenuous. So I gather that what Luke is doing is he's sort of responding to the previous comment, asking about, how were ospreys doing in Connecticut?
yep. Actually, having a long term, that's awesome that Connecticut Audubon has that long term data set. Often you could see, you could even have a couple years data and but having the long-term data set to see trends and then be able to see, oh, was this just a 1 year thing, was this a 2 year thing, or is there something else going on here, and to monitor. I mean, if there's something that, like, say, West Nile impacting crows, or something happens, right, with the fish population, and that's on a natural cycle, that will allow you to see, oh yeah, there was a little dip, but then it rebounded once things kind of, the other factors kind of settled in or rebounded, and you can see. And so but you can't do that unless you have a long-term data set like that. So that's great that that exists, so they can watch it. I know, like with common terns, we have a common tern nesting population on Lake Champlain. It's a state federally listed, it's a state endangered species in Vermont. And so there's a recovery plan with population goals. And similar to some of the other coastal birds like terns and piping plovers, it's not just about pairs, it's also about fledging success. How many young, and you want to see that over a 5 year period, you're sustaining a population above a certain threshold, and your fledging, your reproductive success is at the level that you want. And it's interesting because we're finding, well, gosh, the common tern population, it occasionally has had things like, you know, uh, an owl or something, like really tank it and have it be an awful 1 year. And then it comes back. But for a number of years now, it's been so close, but not quite there, that it's almost making us wonder, well, what is the sustainable population? Like, is our goals a little high here, or can these islands actually get to where we thought, 30 years ago or whatever, 20 years ago? And so that's a conversation. But yeah, thanks, Luke, for that additional information on the population.
we have a question in the room here about cats as predators.
Yep. Keep your
Just
happy cats indoors. Um, there's cats kill birds. And I know the American Bird Conservancy is very involved in cats indoor campaigns. And it can start, there's feral cats and feral cat colonies that are also, impact bird populations. But that is something that it can be healthier for your cat in addition to birds and populations of other critters. Even if they're well fed, they like to hunt. It's in them.
Yeah. Hey, Carol is bringing us back to chimney swifts with an interesting question. Can we build an artificial chimney for chimney
Swifts.
swifts? And
Yeah,
and so
so there's oh,
I was just going to comment that, this species was around long before we started building chimneys. What did they use to nest in? Hollow trees?
trees. Yeah, hollow trees. And there are chimney, like I mentioned, it'd be interesting. Maybe there are these chimney swift towers that you can build and you can install. And it's just like it's a tower for them to nest in. And so there are artificial options. I'm not sure how successful they've been in attracting chimney swifts to them. But maybe if it's an area like you talked about, Steve, there's a place where they took a chimney down. Maybe I'm not sure. It's certainly worth a try. I mean, we've found that artificial nesting platforms and nest boxes have been successful. So it's worth a try or worth it to figure out what might make those structures suitable since yeah, they started, they naturally are in large cavity trees and now they're in chimneys um and maybe the approach to the towers and the design of them could be modified that would be more appealing. Or you got to put in little sound devices to make the chimney noise and then that chimney swift noise, and then maybe that will attract the
Well,
chimney swift to be like, oh, what's going on over here? Okay, yeah, I want to go check this out.
so are there products available? I mean, could someone go online and Google artificial chimney for
Yep,
chimneys?
yep.
Good.
And I don't think they're as active in it anymore, but the Audubon New York office built a number of towers and maybe even tried a couple different designs in the Hudson Valley.
Oh, that's a good trip. Oh, look, Carol comes back with
Carol's
a
already working on it.
man. She's on this. Great. So Stephen is saying Riverbound Farm in Cheshire, Connecticut has a chimney swift tower with excellent interpretive materials for the human visitors.
Oh,
Great.
so Stephen, the tower is successful. Chimney Swifts are using that tower.
Well,
Let's see
um,
if he responds.
yeah, let's see if he has some information
Oh,
on
great.
that.
And Martha, I don't know, can everybody see the chat that Martha gave the
I think they can.
recommendation of Dr. Charles Clarkson at Rhode Island Audubon is doing a lot of research with the chimney swifts.
Well, good. Yeah, we're getting some good information here. So then, Mark is talking about ospreys. Their last year pair had two chicks, but they didn't survive, um, primarily because, sure, blame it on the guy, unintended. But a lot of harassment for red-winged blackbirds. Really, is that a common thing with red wings harassing ospreys?
I wouldn't be surprised if they dive bomb them. I haven't heard that that's actually caused um, nest failure. Um, it seems like it would probably be going back to Luke's, maybe more of a forage or the forage that's available for the chicks if they didn't survive. It seems like it would be a food issue.
Yeah.
Um, it's possible the male or the parents, if they weren't finding what they needed, or what they were bringing back wasn't able to be consumed by the young, that they would starve and not survive.
Well, so come summer, the ospreys get off river heron and get onto menhaden. And while we don't have commercial fishing for menhaden in Long Island Sound, the state of the stocks, coastwide stocks, could affect it. And as a angler, I did not see that many menhaden in Long Island Sound last year. So it very
Hmm.
well could be that they were going hungry.
Yep. Yep.
And we did get a response from Stephen that says it was his understanding that those towers were in Cheshire were effective.
That's great. See, we're right here. We're creating the seeds of a chimney swift conservation project. We have a successful, and actually, I think maybe Carol could be the leader of it. She's acting on it. We have some examples. We can connect her with Dr. Charles Clarkson, and it could be something that grows out from this seminar series and starts in the Connecticut River watershed and then spans
That's
across
right.
the country.
Citizen science. So Carol's coming back and talking about Phragmites, which is invasive in lots of red-winged blackbirds. Um, and she says there's a conflict there. I guess she's responding to the idea that redwings may be harassing ospreys. I mean, um, uh, I'm not exactly sure where she's headed with this.
Or maybe she's asking, is there a conflict with the fact that Phragmites is an invasive species and therefore not desirable as native, but then lots of red-winged blackbirds are using it. And so is there a conflict with the fact that we have a red-winged blackbird using an invasive species? I don't know if she's saying that, but
You know,
my
one of the things, it's not the question I would anticipate with Phragmites because we know that red-winged blackbirds use cattails and can, use lots of other habitats. The big question, of course, down here in Old Lyme is the swallows that use the Phragmites to roost, overnight roost, and the question always comes up, boy, if we extirpated these big stands of Phragmites, would the swallows go somewhere else or would their populations be impacted?
yeah, that would have to be done um bit by bit, and it would have to be monitored to see whether or not, as if an area is being managed, are the swallows still coming and are they using what's regrown or grown back or been planted, and then just do it piece by piece by piece and see the swallow use. And if the swallows are coming back and they're using the native area that's been restored, then you keep slowly restoring the rest of the area.
Yeah.
That's simple, right?
Yeah, right. We'll get right on that. I'm looking at my audience here to see if there's any other questions. I'm not seeing any. We're probably winding down. Oh, I think I got one last question here. Uh, Paul says he needs to sign off, but wanted to thank everybody for a very
Oh,
informative session. And I'm going to second that. I have a number of people to thank, mostly, of course, Jillian. What a wonderful presentation and a great question and answer session that not only thanking you, but the attendees. These were some great questions and really got us thinking. Of course, thank the Phoebe Griffin Library for hosting us down here in Old Lyme, and the hosts of this, the Estuary magazine, and of course Dick Shriver, the Old Lyme Conservation Commission, Connecticut River Salmon Association for sponsoring it. And again, I would encourage all of the listeners to stay tuned to Estuary magazine, both print and online, to get stay up to date on the upcoming seminars, webinars that will be happening in June and October and eventually January. Lots of good things happening. So stick around and have some more fun with this series. So with that, we'll sign off. Thank you again, Jillian. This has been
Thank you, Steve. This was fun. Take care, all. Thank you.